Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Six Hats podcast. I'm so excited to have Nathalie Martinek back with us. And if you haven't already heard, she did an amazing podcast in the last season. You've got to listen to it. A quick intro about Nathalie. She is an ex-systems biology and cancer researcher turned narcissism hacker, consultant, and independent medical culture researcher. Her book, entitled The Little Book of Assertiveness, provides practical strategies and scripts for responding to dominating, controlling behaviors without compromising the relationship or one's values. Now, as a global consultant for leaders in healthcare, tech, and related industries, she now helps individuals and small groups navigate professional relationships that feature narcissistic behaviors. So welcome back, Nathalie.
Thanks for having me, Shami. Great to be back.
This is so needed, talking about workplace toxicity. And literally, it was just last week, and I actually gave a presentation to a group, and it was all about burnout. And they go, great, that's awesome. I know what to do for myself. I know how to look after myself now. But what do I do if I have to turn up at work and it's toxic? And I go, do you know what? That's actually a really great question. Let's explore it today. But workplace toxicity, like, where does it come from, Nathalie? I know you just researched it, but where does it come from?
Well, I think it's useful to define what we mean by toxicity in the workplace. That you walk into a workplace, you have the best of intentions, you just want to do a good job, you want to feel good about yourself, you want to get along with your colleagues and produce something that's worthwhile, or at least get your paycheck and not have any drama and go home. Especially if you have a home life that probably has some drama in it. Work can be an escape, but then you discover it's not an escape because some of the things that we experience in our dramas outside of the home are also turning up in our workplace. And what some of those are the blaming and shaming others, the hypercriticism, boss giving feedback but doesn't give any specific feedback, just what they like or don't like. So you never quite know where you stand with that person or what you need to do better or differently to not get that criticism again. Racist, sexist comments that are just kind of subtle or passive aggressive. Competitiveness, which is normal in lots of places, but it gets to the point where someone is playing favorites and neglecting one person, favoring another, using a lot of diminishing, so put downs, exclusion, leaving people out or leaving certain details out of a communication from someone else so that you can't really do your job or you waste your time doing something that was unnecessary. So gossip, talking about what bad behavior of a colleague and your colleague kind of justifies it and blames you. The things that start to show the signs of potential for bullying and harassment. These are all as a collective or as a collection of toxic behaviors that you can experience in a workplace. And there's more. I just gave an overview.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'd love to explore. A patient actually was telling me about a recent workplace toxic environment. And just to give you context, she is a very experienced school teacher. So she's actually close to retirement. And she has been saying, yeah, you're the art teacher now. And she embraced it. And she was teaching art and she's been loving it. And all of a sudden, her boss says, actually, next term, you're going to be teaching something different. You're going to be teaching maths. And she wasn't expecting it, and there was no conversation around it. And she did disclose that he's quite passive aggressive. And do you know what? It really affected her. She was severely anxious. She was tearful. She had nowhere to go to really talk about it. And when she was telling me the experience, it was important to validate that and take time out, really nourish yourself. And that's what that's what I tend to do in my consults. We've got to look at all aspects of health, from sleep to nutrition to nutrients to even nature walks, and really nourish yourself. And after 2 weeks, she was amazing. She felt great, and she felt she had the resilience to go back and approach it rather than run away. And the reason why I'm telling this story is because it can happen to anyone. It can happen to the most experienced, ready to retire, to someone who's just starting in a workplace, starting their career off, and it catches you by surprise. Because all this time she thought she had an okay relationship, and all of a sudden she was almost bullied and almost all of a sudden the scapegoat, and it can really turn. So I'd love to know, are there telltale signs? Can we Is it predictable? Is it something that we can gauge early on that we can actually take action?
Yeah, it's a really good question because, again, when you start a job, especially if you're new or you've left a crappy environment and you're in what looks like a better environment, there's the honeymoon period. Everything is rosy and everyone's friendly and introducing themselves, you hope. And you're at your best because you're trying to make a good first impression. So that can create this sort of rose-colored glasses view of the workplace. And then over a period of time, you start to notice things that were always there all along. They just didn't affect you. So a lot of people don't notice when there's toxicity in the workplace, like the things I described earlier, because it hasn't bothered them. It hasn't gotten in their way. It hasn't made them, they haven't been the target of bad behavior. So like the example you gave, the teacher probably, it sounds like they've worked a long time. They've had a good enough experience where they're able to move with requests, but the requests were done respectfully. Here comes someone else who makes a disrespectful demand and really pulls rank, this hierarchy. So one of the telltale signs that, not even telltale signs, one of the preconditions for a toxic workplace is not just the hierarchy, but somebody in a position within a hierarchy that is dominating. So they want to pull rank. They want to go, I'm the boss here. You must comply. And if you're somebody who is naturally compliant or more passive, you won't feel like you have a choice and you would just have to do it because of the orders that came from above. But if you're someone who is curious and goes, well, I need to find out a bit more about this request before I say yes to it, I do have a choice here, that challenge could, again, work to their disadvantage if the person who's made the command really needs to hold the power and control. So either way, you can be screwed in these kinds of situations when there's a dominance-based hierarchy. So hierarchy is everywhere, but it's when people use it to overpower someone else, to dominate, diminish, that's when it's a problem. And that in itself is toxic because it doesn't allow for collaboration or negotiation. It's my way or the highway. And because I have the power and the status, you have to do what I say, which is terrible, a terrible thing to experience. So people who are compliant or not as confident in pushing back or asking questions can internalize it and feel awful and have to put up with it. So yeah, that's why some people just end up feeling stuck in this type of environment. And if somebody feels like they can tell you what to do and you comply begrudgingly, they're likely to do it again. So that can intensify and start to become bullying. And the people who are doing this are often unaware that this is their leadership style. We call it a narcissistic leadership or toxic leadership style. They're unaware because they've gotten away with it, especially if they have people who work under them who don't push back or challenge, or if they do, they have a way of overpowering and getting their way. So there's nothing happening that's saying your type of leadership is actually detrimental and you need to change. That message is not going in. So they just keep repeating this habitual way of leading, which has this negative impact on the people who under them in the hierarchy, so to speak.
So this is a question. The recipe for a workplace toxic environment, is it narcissism? Is it power? Is it control? Is it lack of respect?
It's probably all of the above. So I don't think a lot of people who work in an environment that as an outsider would come in and go, wow, there's a lot of toxic features going on here, and I can name them off. They don't tend to notice it because it becomes part of status quo. If people are disgruntled in their environment, they're not feeling valued, or they're not feeling like they're contributing something meaningful or deriving meaning from their work, then they're just going to start to feel negative, and they probably don't notice it happens. And if they're surrounded by lots of people acting that way, that's the normal. So they don't see they're in a toxic environment and that it just feeds this negativity and continues to infect each other. They don't see it. And so when a new person comes in, it might seem like the environment's nice, but over time, they will be pulled into this kind of toxic culture and become one of them. Or if they are strong in their own sense of self and their values, they're going to start to feel like, wow, I feel like I'm an outcast here. I don't fit in because I feel like I'm out. I'm excluded because there's this little clique here and everyone talks the same way or thinks the same way, and I see things differently. I haven't felt included. So that, again, is another indicator of the toxicity.
And does it just take one person to create a toxic environment? I'm just going back from experiences in the last 23 years of working. Does it just take one sometimes?
Yeah, it can take one strong personality. So this comes back to understanding our relationship with authority figures. So we're either people who can respect authority. We might not agree with what that authority figure says. And hopefully if they're collaborative, they're going to want to hear more and we can work together. But usually there's an authority figure in a workplace. If there's no clear authority, there's usually someone who will become the authority because they need that authority to be known. And if that person doesn't like the authority, they disrespect that authority, they try to overthrow that authority and become it. And again, a lot of the time, it's not even conscious what they're doing. It's what people perceive as safe. And in order for them to feel comfortable and confident in that environment, they have to trust the authority. And if they can't trust them, they undermine them. So they turn the rest of the group against that person and they end up being appointed the new authority. This is to help understand how it can take one person to create a really toxic environment. That person has to be a strong enough personality and convincing, and the others not have critical thinking, or their critical thinking is shut off because there's something about that person that they like or believe, and they want to form an alliance with them. That can be enough to enable that one person to take over and influence that shift in the entire culture.
Wow.
And I've seen it.
Wow.
I've done it myself. I've done it in like a friend group because I was disgruntled about something and I could use my influence to turn people against other people, make them see things differently. So all of us are capable of doing stuff like this. It's not just the narcissist. It's all of us can do this when we're not feeling comfortable or secure in their environment.
How common is it? How common is workplace toxicity? Because often, people just get on with it. They just push through and they might become negative, they might reach burnout, but they may not even talk about it or seek help.
Yeah. So like I said, some people are not even aware that they are suffering. They're just used to a certain intensity and they just work through it. They keep their head down. They don't want to get involved and they just get through it. Whereas others, they are overly interested in the politics of the place and they get involved and that's how the drama is created. They have criticism about how things are run or how decisions are made. And so they start to stir things up. And then there are the people who don't see a problem because they're compliant and just are happy to follow rules and order and get validation of work well done. So they're unlikely to kind of rock the boat. So you're going to get this mixed bag of people in all sorts of workplace environments. So I'd like to say toxicity is kind of pervasive. It's everywhere. But it's how people respond to it that will be different and will also make them consider whether the workplace is toxic or not.
So now moving on to solutions, because we love talking about solutions and how we can not only transform our response to it, but can we transform workplace cultures?
Oh, so I'm going to be a bit pessimistic here, Shami, because I'm going to say no, but.
Okay.
We need to ask who is involved in transforming the culture, because often the behaviors of a culture, so we could put this kind of abstract word culture aside and start to talk about the behaviors that demonstrate that toxicity is present, that people are unhappy or happy in their misery. And so it often is a culture established from above, the one who has the power, the one who has the most say. And people kind of go along with it because we default to hierarchy. That's what we're used to. That's our go-to. So we look to authority to be our guide, especially if we don't have authority to make decisions or influence at a high level. So we're going to defer to that person or that group of people. So unless that group of people identify things are bad here and we need to make a change and all of us have to work together, who's responsible for creating that change? Because I see a lot of people who notice it, who don't have that level of authority, try to create the change and they might start initiatives. And then they're seen as a threat to the power structure and they become scapegoated. And I see this over and over again, these workplace saviors that out of the goodness of their heart, they see the suffering, they're experiencing distress, they want to create change and they see a way of doing it, or they think they see a way of doing it, but it pushes against the status quo, and status quo is not going to like it because status quo wants to stay status quo, especially if it believes there's nothing wrong here. You're the problem, not us. So everyone at every level, or enough people at every level, has to be acknowledged that there's a problem in the workplace and it's a behavioral problem, and it's on all of us to have to, or enough of us to try to make a change and then get support to actually change our processes and behaviors to make that change for change to happen. Otherwise, It's just not possible.
It's so true. So what I'm hearing is it is that authority figure leadership. It has to sort of flow down from there to create a cult. And it starts, when people start businesses or run businesses, it's how they create that culture and how it's so important. And it's really interesting. I just was reflecting. So when you do choose to work in a company, and it's something that most people don't really think about, is like, is that company right for you? Because often we go into that scarcity mindset of, oh my God, I've just got a job interview. This is amazing. And I'll take it, without actually interviewing them and saying, is this culture and is it part of my value system? Is that part of the problem?
Yes. I'm so glad you raised that, because we are applying for a job and we have to go through these hoop jumping exercises, getting our CVs ready, cover letters, multiple interviews in some instances. So you have to constantly be on and perform, and you are being judged. They're seeing if you're the right fit. Where is the scope for you to determine if they're the right for you? We don't necessarily see that we are interviewing the organization to see if it's going to serve my needs, because we're too busy wondering if we're going to be chosen, because we want to be chosen. We want to be seen as special. And that's a primal instinct in all of us, that desire to be seen as significant and special and to be chosen amongst a number of candidates in a competition. So we're too busy being perfect or trying to perform to be selected, versus actually, I have confidence enough in myself. There'll be other things available. I'm going to see if you're the right fit. And here are some questions I'm going to ask you. Namely, how do you deal with bullying? What's your process? Can you give examples? The things like that, where you get very specific, which might scare interviewers off, but at least well, they're not equipped to deal with some of the things that I've had to deal with. And I need to know how open they are. So we're too easily trusting of an institution once they've chosen us, because we're like, great, I'm in. I've been invited in, but only to a degree. You're still going to have to keep jumping through hoops in a lot of cases, to constantly prove your value and worth to the organization, but they never have to do that with you. So there's already a power imbalance, because they're paying you, but you're providing something back to them that is going to hopefully benefit them. There's actually an exchange going on, but it's not how we see it in our minds necessarily. And that's not how we end up being treated or seeing it when we're behaving when we're in these roles, because there's a lot of the time is top-down power dynamic. So we don't necessarily have to say that the company says we do sometimes. It's not demonstrated in the behaviors by those holding the power.
And is that something that you can ask or find out? What are your values? What's important for you? Like, how do you actually investigate a company's culture? Because they can say the right things.
Yeah, the values are great words, but it's how do you demonstrate these values, especially when people have violated? What do you do? What's your method of supporting a behavioral change process if people are acting out? You might give specific scenarios, just as you're given specific scenarios when you're being interviewed of how you might manage something. What's your process? You might do the same thing right back based on something you've experienced, without necessarily telling them this is your past experience. It's not a therapy session, but let me test you out and see what you guys do when you're faced with certain challenges that seem to impact everybody. And how prepared are you to work with staff to be able to improve a situation if it's something that's bothered you in the past?
So true, and such good questions. Almost makes people reflect and go, wow, I actually need to interview them as much as they're interviewing me, because is this going to be my home for the next couple of years or the next year? Because you spend so much time at work. How much time do you take to research where you actually want to be?
Yeah, but there's a drawback to that, because you might be seen already as too difficult and not get the job. So you might be working yourself, doing all these interviews and not getting the role, even if you have a stellar CV and references. So you might ask the question, but if you get the job, you still have to have your eyes wide open. And what I tell everyone is assume toxicity, assume it's there, and learn how to work with it, and not get involved in the politics or the dramas that can try to triangulate you, or the conflict between people. Don't interfere with pre-existing relationships between people that seem to be important to them. Don't get in the way of that. Don't become the new favorite, because the person who's been there longer might see you as a threat and try to make your life hell. People don't understand this. You're entering into an already established system. Try not to disturb it. Try to learn it and see all the moving parts. Who are the important relationships with whom, where you can slot into it and influence, but don't just come in with like a grenade and blow things up. You've got to, I think that's something about respecting the culture that you're entering into, whether you're going into a new country. Same with the workplace. There's something that already exists before you join. So learn it first, orient yourself to it, then work out strategy of how you're going to work with it and navigate it, because toxicity will rear its ugly head. And you can't go, oh no, microaggression. Oh no, that was racist. I need to have a way of working with this so it doesn't, my life isn't miserable. And if I can notice if there's things that are getting worse or it's just too extreme, then I have a plan B of looking for somewhere else.
Which kind of leads me on to our next conversation about what can you do? So you gave some great examples of that. So when you're entering, just assume it's there and not get too involved. But what happens when it takes you by surprise? What can you do?
Yeah. So you're having an interaction with a boss or colleague and you get blamed for something and you'd be taken aback. Be curious, going, oh, can you say a bit more about that? Versus getting defensive, which is what we tend to do because we feel like we're being attacked and somebody's misconstruing us and our meaning or our actions. So the curiosity is, can you say a bit more? What led to you to say that, or what led you to think back? I need to understand that. And some people might get annoyed at that. They might have a terse answer, and some might be inclined to think more deeply. So even having that curiosity and asking that question, you're getting a sense of who's more trustworthy and reflective in my environment versus who are the ones I need to kind of have a transactional relationship with and have minimal or share minimal details about my work with that person because I just don't need the constant criticism for whatever reason they're doing that.
So what I'm hearing is don't take it personally. Everyone's in their own reality and that's what they're perceiving. And often it's so easy to take things personally because you feel, when you're at work, am I doing a good job? Am I on the right path? And so it's so easy to take personally because I think it takes a lot of courage to say, to be curious and to ask a question back. And you're spot on. Our natural instinct is to go to defense mode, which is not helpful. And to be able to keep that objective opinion and go, hold on a sec, let's just analyze this. Why am I feeling the way I am? And for example, of my story is it's just the lack of respect. And unfortunately, she looked within and she believed that, and she knew she had so much respect and she had power and authority herself to decide what to do, but just lost it in that moment.
Yeah, which happens when you have somebody who's so domineering in that moment. You forget yourself.
Yeah.
You lose yourself. You get rocked off your center. So you need a way to come back and go, okay, here I am. These are the things that I've got going for me. This is my knowledge base that I could draw on and be able to challenge that person. Yeah, so don't take things personally. Other things are, don't look for validation. Yes, we love validation, but some places are just not going to give it to you. But if you keep seeking it and trying to get it, you're going to burn yourself out. That's what I call approval addiction. And that's one of the traps of any workplace environment trying to appeal to an authority. They're not your parent. They're not going to say nice job, or they might, but you need to find a way to acknowledge how your work, your efforts, and hopefully have a process to help you go, I can improve on this, or I did this well. Yeah, so don't look for validation. Don't need to share your opinion about everything. You don't always need to have an opinion. Again, organization and the people that you work with need to prove their trustworthiness. If you start spouting your opinion without having discovered whether it's a psychologically safe environment where you can challenge or you can be open about something, hopefully work related, but maybe unrelated, unless you have that evidence, why would you do it? Because then people change their impressions like this about you. You could have made a good first impression. The minute you push back too hard, or you're too forceful, or you go outside of somebody's image of you, that's it. It's hard to come back from that. And then they start to look for evidence, again, unconsciously, for why you're the troublemaker. So you don't need an opinion. So that's counterproductive in all the messaging about bringing your whole self to work and being authentic. I say that's all lies and crapola. Yeah, it's BS, because until an organization has proven their trustworthiness to you, why would you do that to yourself? Just do what you need to do to get the job done and feel proud of your work, get along with everyone, and don't make it more than that.
Wow. And what happens when you know you can't? It's toxic and it's really getting you down, and maybe it's affecting your mental health. At what point do you say it's time to go?
It's time to go when people are piling on you and you can see that there's just a bunch of enablers, like nobody's going to do anything about it. Someone might tell you behind the scenes, like, I see what's going on. I'm so sorry that's happening. They're really mean. That's happened to me, but that's as far as it goes. It means, well, we're permitting this kind of behavior to continue here, and there's nowhere for me to go. I can't trust anyone to actually look after me or to have my back in some way, or to acknowledge policy and follow a grievance procedure. Yeah, it might be time to go. But then that's one way. And just going is not an easy thing, because getting a job is a process. Unless you have another one on standby, you might have to go, okay, what do I need to examine in myself? What am I doing that has co-created a situation where I'm not that people are abusing me, but I'm getting piled on, or people keep trying to delegate the task to me, or I'm told to be the one to clean the fridge every week, or things that are not part of my role, or there isn't equal distribution among all of us. I'm somehow getting all the stuff piled on me. Why is that? So what precedent might have I created by saying yes to someone 4 weeks ago? What do I now need to change? And how do I do it in a way that is minimally disturbing, so that, it doesn't blow up in my face where I will be forced to leave?
So true. And I love what you said, because it's really empowering. You're looking within. What can I do differently, rather than waiting for the environment to change? So whether it was, for example, my patient who took time out, recalibrated, found her power back, and was like, right, I think I know exactly how to approach this. I know retirement's around the corner. I know how to handle it. And so that was her strategy, which was so awesome. And because I always think you can't always run away from this. It can happen in any workplace, so you can't keep running. So how do we empower ourselves with skills to say, right? And I love all the strategies you gave about, when you first go in. First of all, it starts with the interview. Is this the right culture? Is it the right value system? And just expect it, but really own your behavior, your role in the whole company. Just really own it. And if it does, having the awareness of, okay, this is what it looks like. And it's all absolutely fine to seek help, whether it's going to see a GP and getting, a psychology referral. I think it's so empowering to develop those, to have those skills and have a support system around you. Absolutely. And in the worst case scenario, it's okay to say, no, this is not the right place. It's time to leave, but there is a process to it. Because what I really want to do is give hope. And I think sometimes people feel quite stuck in situations like that. And there are so many strategies that what you've discussed can give them hope from the moment of, do I leave? Do I stay? And if I stay, what can I do differently? And not rely on the system to change, which is probably the most important message.
Yeah. I think we live in a time where we've become more hyper aware of systemic factors that are barriers to people thriving. But if we rely on these external factors to change, we're saying, I don't have control over my own life and the choices I make to create change. I'm constantly outsourcing that power to a different authority when I have authority. So what can I do? Where do I have control that I can exert in a situation without blowing up the situation, but to reinstate a sense of control and get myself back on track? So it's a management of being realistic about the environment that we're in, the circumstances that we're in, but also leveraging our strengths and the resources that we have available. And I believe every person, regardless of where their station in life is, everyone has resources, internal and things around them, that you can leverage and use to help you make a move towards reclaiming a sense of control of yourself. And we know when we feel more control, we feel more confident, we feel better, we can navigate things more clearly. But when we're waiting for some external thing to save us, rescue us from our distress, it doesn't come, or the wrong things come that look like the right thing, and we suffer later, guaranteed. So this is a message about balancing that internal locus of control with the external, and how do we work with that, and being quite realistic of the workplace context that we all end up in. They're not rosy. Some are great, but there's going to always be stuff there. How do we work with it, and how do we use our strengths to navigate it, because it develops our resilience?
Amazing, amazing wise words, Nathalie. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Well, they can find me at my website, drnataliemartinek.com, and services I provide to help people navigate toxic workplace situations, narcissistic leadership situations. And you could find me and my writing on Substack. under the title of Hacking Narcissism.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you, Shemi.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit the Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au for more resources on how to de-stress, re-energize, and reclaim your health. Enjoy the journey.